¿Vamos poniendo el vídeo, Anne? ¿Sí? Bueno, este es el vídeo que quería compartir, Marisol.
This is the video that Marisol wanted to share you. We didn't have the time in the previous roundtable. Before we start this second roundtable, a couple of things. First of all, you need to sign the attendance list at the entrance. You know that it is important for European projects, so if you have to sign, please do it now. Secondly, as you realize, there have been some changes in the agenda. On the first roundtable, we had Bashar Chao Guerra and Rita Basajo. Unfortunately, they were not able to come, so we did a change. Carolina was supposed to participate in the second roundtable, and she participated in the first one. In the second roundtable, Marilis dos Santos is going to be, she is going to replace her. So apologies for the last minute changes, but you know how things are, and we are all busy, and some of us even sick. Thank you for your questions regarding the work-life balance. I would like to thank all the mothers that help us support our children, and that's why some of us can be here. Also, we have the Collectif de Femmes from Brussels here, so we would like to create a large network of European Migrant Women Association network in order to present our concerns regarding the European Compact on Migration, which cut the rights of migrants and refugees in Europe. So once this event is over, we will send you an email next week, so in order to check if your associations want to be part of this network, and also to see what we can do from now on. Lastly, I would like to ask for a big applause to the colleagues from Por Ti Mujer. Lucy is the president of the Latin network. Thank you very much for having us here in Valencia. Thanks to the whole team. You see the team from Por Ti Mujer.
De verdad, sin ellas esto no hubiera podido.
This event wouldn't have been possible without them. They are really lovely. Thanks, Anna. She had to help us, and also Fatin, thank you for keeping up with us, for all the changes and for everything. Thank you. Without further delay, let's start the second round table, which will be moderated by Angela Zambi. So I'm going to give her the floor so that she can introduce the participants. Dear colleagues, can you hear me? Hello? Okay. Well, Good morning, everyone. There are just a few men here, so it's mostly women in the audience. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Lucy, for having me here in events like this, which are also useful for me to learn. I would like to send all my support to everyone who have suffered the effects of the floodings. Our community is hurting, and we feel that. I think that we are all like our feet are lagging behind, and we are kind of affected. So, in this second roundtable, we are going to analyze the limitations that migrant women face in terms of their political participation. Our colleagues have told us about their personal experiences before as political representatives, as people who are in public positions. And here we're going to talk from the perspective of political organizations. Here we have Margarita as a migrant woman. Marilyn is also a migrant, but we will also talk about the perception of who is a migrant, because it depends on where we come from. Marilyn, she's a migrant, but she's Portuguese, and her surnames are Dos Santos, so things change a little bit here. We have two migrant people here. And again, we are going to do a reflection from the organizations that they belong to. We will talk from two perspectives about the limitation: active vote and passive suffrage. These are things we've mentioned in the previous roundtable, and also we will talk about the European Pact on Migration. This is something that is of concern for social organizations, and we hope that political organizations are concerned about this. We have 4 people from different organizations, organizations of public interest. We have 3 people coming from political organizations and 1 that represents an institution like the government. So we have a wide array of perspectives here. I will start to my left. Maite Ibáñez is a councillor from the Socialist Party in the Valencia City Council. Maite and Lucia, for migrant people here in Valencia working here, they are our colleagues. They are people that have supported us in all our events, in all our processes. And we even refer to them by their given names, Maite and Lucia, not by the surnames, given the level of trust that we have. Also, Marilyn Dos Santos, she's the Feminisms and LGBTIQ plus secretary from Podemos. And to my right, I have Margarita Guerrero Carderon, General Director of the Youth Institute in Juve. It's an important position. So in these steps that we need to cover, we have already some people. And then we have Lucia Beamud, a councillor from the municipal for the Compromís political party. We are going to talk about the right to vote, active vote, passive suffrage, and the European Pact on Migration and Asylum. We will ask the speakers about the position of specific proposals that they have from their organizations, their position on active vote, passive suffrage, etc. We will have 3 rounds of conversations. On the first one, we will talk about active votes Secondly, about passive suffrage. And then we will talk about the European Pact on migration policy and asylum. I would like to request concise answers from the speakers since we are behind schedule. Generally, what are the positions, proposals, etc.? We would like to know if these three questions are on the agendas of the organizations present here, the organizations that we are going to talk with here. We will give the floor to Margarita Guerrero first, given your position in the government, and mostly because you are also a person with a migrant background. We've been talking a lot about the fear of participating. If we add fear with the lack of information, the lack of pedagogy, political pedagogy, the lack of closeness of political parties with this group of the population, how do you see that from the position that you are occupying right now? Good morning, thank you very much. I'm really thankful to be here today. I would like to thank Por Ti Mujer and the Latin Women Network. Also, I would like to send my regards to everyone that has been affected by the flooding. The Minister of the Youth was invited to be here. She couldn't be here. She sends her greetings. But it's also important to place her origin. Sida Arrego, she is half Valencian, half Palestinian. But one of the things that we are going to talk about is the European Pact on Migration and Asylum. She was a European MP, and given the constellation of forces in Europe, this is bad news, and this is bad news for us. Given the situation, we need to analyze the context that we are living in the world. We are living a crisis of the institution, a crisis of representation. Political institutions are perceived as being far away from the people, and especially in the case of migrants, this is due to the conception of the systems that has assimilated migrants with the workforce. So the exercise of citizens' rights is an obstacle run. This also has to do with the quality of democracy. If we think about the amount of people that vote, because among the people that can vote, many people do not vote. Who are the ones that vote the least? Those who lived in the poorest neighborhoods. Usually, richer people always vote. If we also know that there are people that are left on one side, like migrant populations, I guess that we will talk about the countries where we have reciprocity of votes.
I wanted to talk strategically where we are placed. That is an incomplete democracy, a democracy that is not solving the problems of people, and that's where disaffection is originated. My work is related to young people. I need to dismantle the speech of young people saying of the myth of young people being not interested in politics, but it's really politics that's not interested in people, in young people. That's also what Carolina said about the migration process. We've all gone through this process. Our mother said that they were coming only for a year, and then she came back, and I didn't recognize her. I had to come out when you were speaking because I identified with that story, and it was really hurtful for me. It broke my heart. This is a systemic issue. I want to place this because we need radical measures to transform this. Specific Measures are necessary, but we need to be radical. Go to the origin of the system. The system is incompatible with life. We've seen this with Dana. The eco-social crisis is not what's coming in the future. That it's already arrived. It's already happening. Now we're living in a hysterical time, more than a historical time. We're living a reality where Europe needs a lot of labor, migrant labor, but at the same time it invests a lot of money to build walls, fences, and externalizing borders. They use necropolitics for this, but it also needs the labor, the workforce. They cannot assimilate the workforce as citizens, but we have data that say that the invoice of racism, 17,000 million euros a year, is 1.3% of the GDP. Carolina said that at the end of the day, we're people and we're defending an issue of dignity and human rights. I just want to say that we're living an issue that transcends Spain, Europe. It has a structural nature, and this has to be approached this way. We need a change of paradigm where we move from acknowledging the right of mobility, but let me defend also as a migrant the right to have roots, because people do not want to leave their home countries. They are obliged to leave because of lack of opportunities. We need a change of system that allows us to have decent lives, a planet where we can live and have human rights for everybody. I'm going to insist a bit because we're talking about the right to vote. I am here in Valencia. I have been for 5, 6, 7 years living in Valencia. I walk in the street, I go to the doctor, I have my life in the community, and the person who is going to have the highest responsibility in my city, and I don't have the right to vote to these people. It doesn't give me a right to say anything about the city, about the people that are going to be elected, and so on, or who are going to take decisions on the plans, on the politics of my city. I don't have a right to vote for them. What I want to know is from parties such as yours, how do you approach this issue from within, so that we're not just too practical? This vote, well, we don't want us to get small incentive to get votes. I wanted to set this framework, but this is has specific measures that is not incompatible, but we have to be honest on how things are approached. We support regularization because we want all the people here to have their rights. That is an exclusion that is caused by the system. Obviously, we do not have, unfortunately, the strength correlation that allows us to have a change that we need. We need another foreign people's law that is not based on the securitist approach. We need a mechanism. This law has been used with anti-racist movements, and I was saying in the introduction, the accident in Lorca that gave place to the regularization, there were other regularizations in these countries. We have been struggling to have this regularization. There are other issues, such as the reform of the immigration law regulations. We are making many proposals to improve this, but it is still insufficient because the framework is insufficient. We are here, we're working on this, and I was talking about the history, and in 2006 we already discussed that the fact of living here and paying tax here and being citizens of this country should give the right of regularization. However, we have some systems where only the countries that have agreements of vote reciprocity can access these rights. So we can take steps to improve this. We can get more specific. I was going through all the ordeal that a migrant person has to go through. They have to inscribe, they have to do some red tape. Of course, we can do ad hoc solutions and develop campaigns. But all this is just specific solutions. We need to be more radical in the measures that we need. Marilyn, I want you to talk now. You're a migrant person, but of course, from a different category. You're privileged. You have European traits that have been taken as the traits that to be a person you have to have these traits. You come from Europe. What is your situation? Can you vote in your city? First, good afternoon to everybody. First, I wanted to thank you for this forum. I was listening to the first panel. I think this is going to be very enriching for me, and I feel really lucky to share this space with all these people, all these women. I also wanted to pay tribute to what's happened here a month ago. And I also want to thank all these women, all these migrant women, that I think you always support everything, the neighborhood, the cities, and you're doing this from the margins. And you're invisibilized. You are covered by mud, metaphorically and literally. I want to thank all these women who, with the care work, are making this recovery possibly after a crisis. It's very often, most of the times, it's the women who are carrying on their shoulders most of the work of the recovery for crisis. As Carolina mentioned in her panel, the people who migrate live different lives. They live in a place and they're always thinking of their return. I am the granddaughter of migrants and also of parents who weren't born in Spain. And I always had some anguish and some kind of rage because my grandparents forced me to be born in a place and didn't give me the opportunity of living somewhere else. What would my life in Portugal be like if they had stayed there? I always felt belonging there, and the other way around, when I go to Portugal, I'm not from Portugal either. While I was listening to them, I thought if I felt I was living a life that wasn't mine, or that I have lost the opportunity of living some other life, how would this be for them? What would be their feeling? I mostly think of my grandmothers who followed their husbands, who left a dictatorship in Portugal for a dictatorship in Spain that felt much freer in terms of economy and felt like a place where you could find more opportunities of work. I would like to embrace all these grandmothers and mothers who gave up their lives at home with their roots to give a life to their daughters and granddaughters who haven't been grateful enough. Now they have been able to go back to their home country and they have managed to enjoy a life that they were dreaming about all their lives. So thanks to them and to all the mothers and grandmothers that look after us. Now let's talk about the vote. I think it's very difficult to position yourself in a position where, well, of course, we should be completely in favor of a passive, active suffrage universal suffrage. I represent a party that has a very radical position, but which is a very necessary and fair position. Me, as millions of people living in this country, working and contributing to the general well-being of society. However, we don't have this right to vote, and I'm talking knowing that I am privileged because I'm white. I come from a country that is a part of the European Union, so I have access to this nationality, but I have decided not to accept it. Well, I'll get to a point where I'll have to become Spanish, nationalize myself, because I am in a political party and I cannot vote or present myself as a candidate. I know that I am in a very privileged position, but I know that I have to pay. There's an issue of class even in the access to nationality. This is a historical debt that we have within our political system. I think it's a matter of social justice, that all citizens are at the same level. It's not right that some have rights and others just have duties. And this right to voting and the access to nationality must not depend on the origin, but it should depend on the commitment you have with the network and the society you belong to. It's also a matter of democratic quality, in the sense that precisely in a society we are removing the options of political participation to the people who are at greater risk, at greater risk of social and economic exclusion. And if you remove the possibility of choosing who's going to take the decisions about their access to works, health, education, or in the case of women, about the regulation of the work of care and domestic work and so on, and also the protection of the victim of gender violence. We are excluding these women. We have several specific proposals, but I wanted to say that political participation is not only based on the vote. We had a colleague that said that first it starts in the social participation. For me, it's very difficult to make this differentiation. For me, activism is politics, and it's very difficult for me to separate them. So I think the first macro proposal for political participation is that we should derogate the law against demonstrations. This is limiting our political participation. The vote is every 4 years, and this law against demonstrations is limiting our possibility of protesting. This law is criminalizing all protests that have not been communicated. We should be able to protest without warning. The moment we warn, this loses a lot of political power. And there's administrative sanctions, and this depoliticizes, makes them non-political. Only the rich people have the right to protest, but the fact is that rich people do not have this need, and people in irregular administrative situations are going to be limited by the fear of being expelled, deported from the country, and this limits the work that many anti-racist organizations does for the closure of the concentration centers of immigrants, and also in the struggle for the right of abortion for migrant people. Of course, this anti-demonstration law and the possibility that of being stopped in the street and being arbitrarily identified because of the color of your skin, and this law should also forbids the possibility of reporting this type of abuse because you cannot take pictures to police and so on. And this also limits the freedom of expression in social networks. I cannot protest in the street and I cannot do political publications in the social networks. All this combination of institutional racism discourages people, the most precarious people, from being able to participating in activism and protest, and also in vote. This anti-demonstration law also makes you not want to, discourages you from participating and wanting to vote because you are discouraged and it seems like there's no use for it. As a part of social integration, we have the responsibility of integrating all diversities and all realities that exist in a country. To have this social integration, and very often white people make ethnic minorities responsible for this, but the responsibility belongs to everybody. Sometimes we also believe that if really political parties or the authorities, the migrant vote, if it gave them enough importance, maybe some of these issues would be solved differently. In the next elections, the Latin vote will be fundamental. Yes, let it be fundamental. I also want it to be essential. And then we have the Africans, and they don't even speak about us. Latins first, and then all the rest. Lucia, I don't know where to start, but let's see. Maite, and you can comment on this. This is my city, so I can say something else. From Compromís, the right to vote of migrant people, what is being discussed in Compromís? Marilyn said that this is a historical debt, but now it might be even more than that. Migrant people are the focus and the target of all political campaigns when the elections come, but they can't even have the right to defend themselves in the elections, and that's really serious. We are sharing the same territory, whether it is because we have been born in it or because we have decided to migrate to these countries. At the end of the day, we are neighbors, we live together, we work together, we pay taxes, and at the end of the day, we cannot exercise this fundamental right of deciding what we want a city to be like, what people are going to be taking decisions on, how well the sewage system is going to be organized, if we're going to have parks, if we're going to have more public or private public services, politics on equality, on services and so on, everything related to the city. And then that also affects the regional government, which is even further away. So more than 73% of migrant people cannot vote, but they are living in this territory for many years. And they're sharing the territory because that's the only way. All countries of the European Union and countries that have agreements of reciprocity, those are the ones that can vote. We're using political rights as if they were some kind of charity, but no, they are basic and fundamental rights. This is extremely serious. These rules that have been established, whether it's in the municipality or in the region or in the state, we should put an end to these rules. Some of the measures have been already mentioned. We're going to share many points of view. I would have liked to have a colleague from the municipality, from the Partido Popular, from the right-wing party. It would have been an interesting debate. It's important that we are able to approve the popular legislation initiative and being able to exercise the right to protest. We should derogate the anti-demonstration law, and also the immigrant law should be derogated and changed. You've been a councillor, you have been promoting some policies, some equality policies. However, something is left there stuck, unchanged. I want to insist on this because it affects me. Within the municipality, as councillors, you are not able to change these municipal norms to give people the right to vote. These changes are done at a national level, not at a municipal level. What other initiatives can you favor within the municipality? Well, you can favor there to be entities of citizen participation within the town hall, for example, the Immigration Council, which is now almost disappearing. It's not been completely cancelled, but it will be really soon. You need other agencies of collective decision taking. For example, when you want to decide how to structure, let's say there's a site where you want to build a park, so you need some consensus for them. And when you're fighting for the construction of this park, you see that there are women, there are migrant women, there's a diversity, and there's different types of needs and difficulties in order to exercise this occupation of the public space. What you need to guarantee in this space is that all the people who inhabit this territory, in this neighborhood, should be able to decide on this, the fate of this space. These are things that you can do from the point of view of the municipality. From there, which is the position of compromise, the one that I mentioned from the beginning, these rules must be changed. We must not allow to have people being the target of all political campaign, of all fake news. They should be able to defend themselves in elections, to defend their interests. And on the other hand, obviously, you also have things to say from the municipality. You should be able to decide both at the level of the city, of the region, and at the state. Maite, as you can see, everything points at you. Why do I say this? Because you are from the Socialist Party, and that is the party that is in coalition with other parties. You are the main figure in government right now. What do you have to say about this right to vote for migrants? Is this considered, and all these additional policies that have been mentioned? What do you have to say about this? First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. This forum, forums organized by Esporti Mujer and other coordinators, they are all fantastic because they integrate different perspectives. We have a common thread that unites us all. I would like to contribute to what has been said by my colleagues. I mean, I would like to mention that scenarios such as the one that we're living with the DANA, these scenarios can visualize that beyond the borders, languages, colors, and accents, there's something that cannot prevent solidarity from happening. Amelia Valcácer says that feminism is the ethics of solidarity between among women. I think that solidarity among women is something that is invisibilized. And I want to thank Lucia for her participation, because I know that she's living directly the effects of Dana, and she's making a much greater effort than us. We have seen the images of what's happening, but she knows all the neighbors that are suffering this directly. I think that this context can allow us to value all the help and all the policies, all the immigration policies that should be started. I would like to speak about immigration counselor of the previous government, to remember what it was, what it could have been, and clearly what it will be in the future. Indeed, we defend the participation, the right to vote, but there are other essential tools for participation in order to define municipal policies by all citizens. In Valencia, in the last 8 years, we have lived the experience where municipal policies have integrated two councils, the Council of Cooperation and Immigration, and something fundamental within a city council, which is a councillor of immigration. PP and Vox have eliminated this councillor. That's what they want to make invisible. On the one hand, they're making a part of the population invisible. The colleagues said that the system is not compatible with life. In Valencia, we are walking with ignoring a reality that takes us 20 years back, with some immigration policies that we thought that we had left behind. And as Lucia said, I have missed the representation of the Conservative Party, of Partido Popular. It's a pity that they're not participating in this forum, because this is the political party that's governing right now, and they are the best to explain what are the policies that they are developing right now. We talked about participation policies that support the active vote and also support a definition of municipal policies by means of immigration. We're talking about the Immigration Council that have gathered more than 60 or 70 entities. As Angela said, sometimes you're not even aware that there was such a plural representation in the city of Valencia. These councils are not linked to budgets. They do not convey a greater degree requirements in the economy of the city council. And this is transformed. There is an abandonment of this council, and also some measures that are not really transparent. There was a framework of dialogue to decide which were the projects on immigration that the city council would be carrying out. There were some proposals carried out. The budgets were explained, but this transparency disappears now because they're not being transparent. On the other hand, you have the stigma. The stigma is really dangerous, because we're seeing this in the cities and at an international level. The fake news is a terrible problem. As my colleagues from Mas Madrid said, you suffer directly when you're in the first row defending human rights. You're being attacked for it. And the City Council of Valencia has the extreme right, and we see all the red lines that they are setting, the red line of having to do with the language and the culture. On the other hand, the red line related to any project related to equality, LGTB, and on the third place, immigration.
We are also seeing clear crimes like hoaxes in the social media, and all the Vox speaker announced that an immigrant had made a crime which was false. So serious accusations in this case. Our approach is voting is essential, and that's something that we've been working on at a local, national, and international level. But also, participation systems are not allowing migrants to express their voice. These participation systems, the plenary rooms in the city councils where representatives came from 60, 70 entities, universities, trade unions, they could express their voice and they could tell their entities what had happened. That strengthened the relations, and that was reflected in the minutes of the city council. We talked about the measures related to the budgets, etc. To conclude, I would like to talk about feminine migration. We know that traditionally the image of migration was young men, young workers. In this case, the value of female migration is key. I would like to thank Angela and Lucy mainly for the work that they have done in the Migration, Women and Employment Days, where they talked not only about legal issues, about employment and others, but also there was social support in this case. This is a factor that could weaken you psychologically, but that is something that we need to foster. And also specific resources focusing on migration. One example, having a migration city council's office or specific projects that understand migration as something horizontal, because as Lucia said, from the government, well, we made some errors, but we have tried to have an horizontal approach on migration. The Equality City Council's office had projects on migration, also in the youth department and culture. We didn't want it to be a silo. We wanted this migration to be present in all departments. And with that, we had specific projects. Valencia is the one of the main entry doors of migration in Spain. If now we put in the same box a profile of social services like they are doing, combined it with the social welfare budget for vulnerable people with no attention to newcomers, to families, to women that are here on their own. These people need specific resources. If resources are not allocated for projects like human rights defenders, if Valencia Ciudad Refugio does not receive a subsidy, and there are so many things that had an horizontal perspective of migration in Valencia as an intercultural Mediterranean city, then what kind of policy is being promoted? I would like to underline the effort that we need to make so that from the smallest city councils to the national government and also at an international level, we've seen the intervention of Lady Bajín in the European Socialist Party and Sandra Gomez. This mechanism should be fostered so that any migration profile is recognized so that they have a space to participate and intervene anywhere.
Bueno, al final no estoy...
Well, let's close this first part. I think there were two main ideas about the right to vote. Margarita said that this requires a structural change, a change in the system as we are seeing. Lucia also talked about the levels. There are things that we need to start doing that need to be done at the state level.
eso que tenga reflejos en las políticas.
And this is something that needs to be reflected in European policies. An interesting idea is the following. If we can consider other political participation tools, as Maite was saying, like the city council. This is a reality that we face in Valencia. The two city council offices have been extinguished, so maybe we need to put the focus on this. Would you like to add something, Margarita, or can we move on to the second topic? We are a bit behind schedule, so let's move to the second topic. The passive suffrage and the possibility of people, especially migrant women, to be candidates to municipal, regional and national elections. In the previous roundtable, we did analysis on the fears, on the real possibilities that women have, which sometimes are scarce. I see two things here. First, our own responsibility as migrant people. So if you see that you can participate, you should. That on the one hand, and then I would like to put this on the table. In a conference, Professor De Lucas talked about ethnic monitoring. We should start doing an ethnic monitoring. If we are 14, 15, 16% of the population in this country, in the Spanish state, this should be reflected at an institutional level, in the institutions that govern the country, at all levels, state level, municipal level, regional level, but we see that there is a big gap here. My question is, what is being done in the political parties in this sense? Lucia, since I'm home here in Valencia, so I can ask you directly. It is true that with the previous municipal government, we saw many things, and I recognize your work in the Equality City Council's office in terms of the promotion of the rights of migrants. You've been at the vanguard at the front line of everything that we do. But I think that in Compromís, for instance, there is not a recognizable person with a migrant background, and even if we recognize the work that you've done, especially in the case of the vice president of our government, which was, let's say, in the mud sticking. Well, this is a long reflection, but everything is related. Acknowledging everything that you said, when in a program called La Revuelta, I asked you if you were more or less male chauvinist. People used to say more male chauvinist, even if no one accepted that they were fully male chauvinist or racist, but they used to say that they were more male chauvinist but not racist at all. In a patriarchal colonial system, we are all a bit racist and a bit male chauvinistic. But what happens when there is a broader social recognition, when we accept that we have some male chauvinism within ourselves? There's a lot of work to do, that's true, but there are some structures that focus on basic issues like smaller things that were more difficult to detect before. Same thing is in terms of male chauvinism, but that doesn't happen with racism. When you talk about textbooks, we see that there is a lack of women as reference, as benchmarks. When you talk about, in the Jaume I Awards here in the Valencian region, you realize that no women have been received these awards. You see that everywhere, and we always say that there is not enough representation. In the political arena, same thing. Somehow we have accepted that we need to have quotas in the electoral tickets. Because, yes, of course, there are good women in many important places with an extraordinary CV, given their academic track record or their day-to-day life, which is something we shouldn't forget. But when we talk about migrants or racialized people, I don't like that term, but I think that's the one we can use in order to see where the margins are. Well, this does not happen in that case. That is a reflection that we need to make. It's true, as you say, as migrants, migrants need to say we are here, but given the structures, given the way that the system has been created, it's not enough with people just raising their hand. So we need an exercise at all political levels, in all political parties, to review these electoral tickets. And that's something we should also do in Compromís, in our political party. Yes, of course, because just one image, just someone, maybe other political parties have someone, Maide, talking about the same thing in the Socialist Party. I think the same reflection should be made, but not only at a local level, at a state level too. Even if there are Afro-socialists and others, but in the government, I think there is an MP. Well, but yeah, there's an MP, but not in the government, not at the government level. I'm not talking about political party. I don't remember any political figure with an institutional political position in the Socialist Party with a migrant background. Even if we have the Afro-Socialist Association, so what is their reflection in this case? Well, I fully agree. I remember a project from the Intercultural Cities Network, of which Valencia is a part of. There were some interesting projects, and one of them focused on what you said, the monitoring of the city council staff. For instance, let's see what the percentage is, what are the levels in positions of responsibility. And it was an interesting experience, because this is a challenge that we shouldn't forget, a challenge that we all share. We have Jason Sanchez in the regional parliament, we also have Luca Andrea, but it's true that it's a challenge. This is something that we need to take into account in order to put the theory in the front line. This is something that we are theorizing through texts and proposals, but we need to translate that into reality. It's true that in Podemos, it's not the same. Podemos was one of the political parties that put all the diversities on the table, all of them, not only racialized people, there were deaf-dumb colleagues, LGBTI+, so in the front line you had almost anyone, and also Rita Bosa, which is something close to my heart. So what else do we have beyond that? Well, always keeping on. As for specific proposals, we didn't really focus on the voting rights. Podemos always defends voting rights with specific proposals. We know that with our strength in the national institutions, because that's something that you need to do at Congress level. We do not have the capability to do that, but there's a proposal that is on the table. And we don't need to be pioneers to do things like that, but in some countries, like New Zealand, France, or Sweden, this is something that is recognized. This is something that can be done. And in order to do that, you need to change the electoral law so that the rights to passive and active voting is recognized for any foreigner living 2 years in these countries. And the only thing that you should show to be part of the electoral ticket is to be living in Spain for 2 years. Our responsible of anti-racist policies in our parties would scold me off if I wouldn't convey about their specific proposals. Also, to reduce the time to access the national citizenship in Spain. In Spain, the period to obtain the citizenship is quite long, and it also differs on the bilateral agreements, depending on the country of origins. We want this to be reduced and also to put the focus on refugees. Also, elimination of bureaucratic barriers like the exam on constitutional knowledge, which is absurd. Of course, it discriminates due to economic reasons, and also it does not really reflect that someone is integrated. How many Spaniards born in Spain would pass that test? It's absurd. This shows nothing, and we should look for ways to grant the nationality with peoples with functional diversity. These tests are not adapted, and also we should recognize the right to create political parties for non-European foreigners. So Podemos, of course, supports the change in the law, in the immigration law, and also this initiative should be supported and not focus so much on paid work. We should rather focus on human rights, not so much on having employment or not. Because as women know, you don't always earn money because you work, and working does not mean that you earn money. So, as for the active participation, I think it's good to do this reflection. Even if I think that in Podemos there is a lot of diversity in our party, but it does not represent the amount of foreign population in the country. For instance, I realize that in our country there are many migrants who do not dare to make a step forward. Maybe we do not open the space enough so that these people do not fear that they have to fulfill 1,000 requirements in order to have their name on the electoral ticket. Our strategy is international feminism in the center. We focus on a global perspective of global justice, and from this internationalist feminism, what we do to open the political space to migrants, and specifically migrant women, our feminine network goes beyond the political party level. We have a network with many countries, specifically Latin America, but we put a lot of effort in the creation of global feminist networks with feminist movements. Also, we try to promote the participation in spaces to listen, like this one. When we were in part of the government, the Ministry of Equality, and this is a way to show what we would have done if we were still in the government. There was an international feminist congress with feminist voices from all countries, and many papers and a lot of knowledge derive from this meeting. And with that, we need to have a feminist foreign policy outside all economic interests, and also putting the focus on ending the genocide in Palestine, and also the absolute rejection of neoliberal Eurocentric feminism. We should do things from a critical perspective to ourselves, being aware of our privilege. But this point of view is important to know that migrant women should not only be in the electoral tickets, but we also need to listen to them, because you, in many occasions, have the key to have the solution to many crises. I'm thinking about the climate crisis, for instance, and back to the floodings in Valencia. In this kind of crisis, the access to subsidies should be open for everyone, but also we need to make them aware of the solutions, because they exist. Because the root causes of climate crisis are capitalism or colonialism, and we need to listen to these voices and not wait for migrant people to do heroic acts like we've seen in the media, like migrants cleaning up mud and let's give them their Spanish citizenship. No, we shouldn't wait for them to do heroic acts. We need to give them the voice. We need to have them in a TV studio so that they tell us what their experience in the countries is, what we should do in Valencia if this happens again. I'm sorry to cut you off, but does Podemos have anything else on the table? You've done a great work to include migrants in all your bodies. Is the party going to continue in this path? Yes, of course. I'm showing some political positions which I think are essentials, so that migrant people feel that the doors of our organizations are open, always with the possibility of criticizing us. Organically, in our country, there is an anti-racist secretariat at the national level with presence in all territories, which is led by Serin and Maye. And I think that the next step is to have anti-racist voices in all places, because migrants and racialized people should be everywhere and not talk only about this. It's not their only concern. What we saw in the previous government with all the feminist progress that we did thanks to Podemos, well, we made a lot of noise, which was heavily criticized, but without that noise you cannot make any step forward. So, again, we need a lot of anti-racist noise in the institution. We need to have the city councils and the Congress full of all kinds of people, black people, migrant people, fat people, migrants, etc., so that all these ideas are translated at a national level and European level, and so that we don't see that the Socialist Party votes for the entry of the far right in the European Commission. With that, we won't be able to stop racist policy.
Vale, lo dejamos ahí.
Okay, we'll leave it here. The idea here is that we are going to reflect. We are 15% of the population in the country, and that 15% of the population needs to be reflected at all levels, in all institutions. Margarita, do you think you are a privileged person, given your position? When you get there, do you look backwards and say, who will be here when I'm not here? How do you feel about that? Well, of course, there's an issue of privilege objectively, and then there's a shared responsibility. We've talked about this a lot with other colleagues in the institutions. We have the feeling of collective belonging to open the way for other people that will come after. Migrant people are underrepresented in all institutions, but also they have a high level of rotation. Seminin Baye is no longer in Congress. I'm not criticizing that. This is just an example, and this happens everywhere. We have a higher level of turnover. Rita, for instance, as well. We are aware of this circumstance. Why do I want to mention this? Because in the left, in general, in all its spectrum, we need to be critical about this, because the right and the far right work on migration issues. They instrumentalize it, but you have a user walking, many people see the parade. Of course, you cannot. I don't want to put the responsibility on people who go there, but I'm talking about the people who design the vote strategies. Well, they have the structures for that, and they focus on people who have the right to vote. They know that if migrant vote would be organized, even with our limitations, we could decide on the city council, we could decide for the election of mayors. And in the left, we are not really aware of this. They do this from an instrumental perspective, and the far right does it because they have migrant speakers, racist, xenophobic, male chauvinists, but they are migrants and they see themselves represented. In the left, it is much more difficult, even if the proposals defend the people much more. But if there is no representativity, it's really difficult for people to see themselves reflected. In Murcia, I tried to get people around me, but people told me I cannot vote. But even in that situation, we were able to open a certain path. Wherever I've been, I've felt that we've tried to open the way, and sometimes we are not aware because our daily survival is difficult enough.
Creo que es muy importante generar.
It's really important to have some models for future generations. My mother, for instance, I cannot ask my mother to have a political participation. She's worked non-stop so that I could be the first generation in my family to go to university. Why should I ask her to organize? We have been able to access new spaces, we had better conditions, and now we can say, look, this is not okay. There is a systematic exclusion. We live in negationist democracies from past centuries that deny that our countries and cities are multiracial. I was raised in a neighborhood with 149 nationalities. Did you see a reflection at the public level, at the political level? No. And that's the reflection that we need to push collectively so that we introduce these changes.
Also, political parties are not usually welcoming spaces in general. Let's leave it there. Imagine spaces that are welcoming for women, for migrants, for young people, because they reproduce the power of society, which is concentrated in cis, heterosexual men. All organizations are a reflection of society. That's why we need to introduce all the mechanisms that colleagues were talking about internally and in the public policies, because from being from a specific ideology, that does not make you free from elitism, racism, male chauvinism, and so on. Dear colleagues, I think you have asked for too much. It was 3 topics that could be divided into 2 different panels. But now we're going to talk about something which is very important, which is the European Pact of Immigration and Asylum. We started late, half an hour, a quarter of an hour late. Well, maybe we'll get 5-10 minutes more after 2. From a text from the Spanish Commission of Help for Refugees, I got this, and I quote, an asylum seeker who comes to a European border should submit itself to a previous screening of identity, health and security that includes the registration of biometric data and the preliminary examination of vulnerability. With this information, the goal is to direct the person to the adequate procedure. First, if they don't have any protection needs, they are derived to the return border procedure. If they want to request asylum, they channel their asylum request through an accelerated procedure or by the ordinary asylum-seeking procedure. End of quote. From here, we can move on to the implementation plan of the European Plan of Immigration and Asylum, which has been divided into 10 blocks that schedule the different actions by the member states for the correct implementation of the pact. Within these blocks, we have issues such as the first block, which is the common system of information, the management of borders. We have different concepts there. We're talking about the legal fiction of non-entry. People will be physically in a European territory, but legally they won't be present. They also speak about the concept of safe country. They talk about return and along, etc. And this could be material to debate in a whole new table. And tomorrow we have a specific table to address this option. So to the components of this table, my question is, which is the position from your organizations? Have we reflected on the European Pact? Which have been the findings? What have you observed? What has to be taken to the public space? What has to be conveyed? Let's start by Maite. Thank you. First of all, as I said in my first intervention, we have a common thread within the left, and in this case the sorority of women, sisterhood of women. So we must not feed the conflict because the right wing is expecting any kind of conflict, friction to put the focus on the hoaxes on immigration. These last days, we have seen a will from the government of Spain to listen to all agents. Different social entities have met, and there's a common axis of defense of human rights, protection of immigration, struggle against mafias, organized crime, and then an essential issue that I would like to point out. The text, the law is really, really long. It's 2,000 pages long. And within that defense of immigration, of safe immigration, and within the programs of labor immigration, there's something that is essential that we had been stuck on since 2014, which is the convalidation of diplomas of qualifications. We're talking about a social, political, scientific and cultural representation of many women who have had to develop other jobs because they have not had their qualifications accepted and validated. The last piece of news from Minister Diana Moran was that she committed herself to improving and solving that standstill, and also drafting agreements with these origin countries, using also artificial intelligence, and making sure that this month of November there are more resolutions than requests. So something is changing there, and there's a fundamental axis within the whole process that is going to be implemented now, which involves visualizing the profile of migration with some professional conditions that we still had to work on, and also the defense of human rights, and also an active listening to all social entities that are contributed, because this is a document that is alive and European countries must collaborate on this, and the rest of the world too. So from these countries we should get support to regularization, and also we should be able to respond to migration as it deserves to be responded. The City Council of Valencia has a responsibility in the regularization and the welcoming of the newcomers. And recently, the day of the Dana, a family with children, because children are red lines that we've never gone past in this City Council. These children had not been accommodated because they came from Huesca, and that is a human rights issue that we must not forget, and we must guarantee a safe response, and we must host them the way we can do it. As President Sanchez said, we are daughters of immigration. Let's not be mothers of xenophobia or racism. Thank you, Maite. And it's true, we are aware of this active listening from the government. Lucia, have you? It is the national government who's in charge of this. What have you observed? This text is, what's happening is terrible. The European Union is more concerned in guaranteeing privileges than in guaranteeing rights. And based on this, this treaty does not guarantee the right to asylum, to accommodation. All human rights are violated. The goal at the end of the day is very clear. They don't want any person to get to Europe. And if anybody comes to Europe, they want them to leave as soon as possible. This state of being and not being, as if you were Schrodinger's cat, it may sound funny, but it's not funny at all, because this person has no rights allowed. There's a violation of all the rights this person has as a person. It is treated as a commodity that the states can negotiate on. And it's a kind of a solidarity that you can choose. If you pay a third party as a state for this third party to protect your borders. So this third party decides whether this person enters or not. It's turning people into commodities. People who are fleeing from countries that are suffering wars or horrible situations, they're just looking for a better place. And people even who take their children in migration journeys that are absolutely deadly. Some of, for example, the one that goes through the Canary Islands is extremely dangerous. And then when you get to Europe that's supposed to be a place of freedoms and rights and so on, and it was based upon these ideas, and at the end of the day, they find that it's precisely the opposite thing. What we need to guarantee in the end with different types of laws within the European Union is what I said at the beginning, guaranteeing privileges and not guaranteeing rights. We have 5 minutes left. 2 minutes each, so that you can tell us what you have done from your parties. We'll finish this panel at 2, and we'll have 10 minutes for questions and comments. Marilyn, I just wanted to clear out something that sisterhood is something that I always feel inside. I point out an ideology, not a colleague. I hope this way of listening was found at every level. The strategy of the least bad is not good. The far right is already here. They've already won. We need to be braver in our speech. We need to confront them. If we don't do it, we won't be able to stop something such as this pact, which is institutionalization of xenophobic and racist violence, which is already found at every level, but this is like the cherry at the top of the cake. We've presented a bill of law, and we've expressed our absolute rejection to this pact. To mention the main points that we think that have to be changed, first of all, we need a change of approach. This securitization and this fortress Europe cannot be there. This responds to these narratives of threat that the media are responsible for to a great extent. They present migrants as a danger, either for security or a danger for something that unbalances our welfare state, because they're going to take away our services from us, and all this has legitimized this type of policies. We must go to an approach of human rights. We must have a European system of obligatory, compulsory solidarity. It seems that the responsibility is of the country itself, and other countries may pay in order not to host immigrants. We want to make this solidarity obligatory, and the responsibility shared by all the states, and break this link with third parties, third countries, which are clearly countries that violate human rights systematically. We should also build legal and safe paths against these fictions of non-entry, support solidary countries, and promote family reunification, and also facilitating the access to asylum through embassies. It's also fundamental to make our borders safe spaces. In order to do that, we should put an end to Frontex, and we should see what's going on there, and also we have to have a sea rescue instead of criminalizing NGOs who are working on this. And of course, we need to close the immigrant centers. We should implement cross-cutting and feminist policies, helping women who are victims of gender-based violence and sexual exploitation, for example. And last, and the more generic proposition, is that we should look for paths that, to look beyond and have a look at the deep causes, root causes of migration. Have a look at the armed conflicts, climate change, and so on, which are the reasons that cause migration. Our position is that we believe that this law is absolutely atrocious, and this is not the way we should go. We should support human rights and look for an alternative, because it's necessary, and also because if we have political will and we are brave and we resist all the pressures that we will get from all the political powers, from all types of powers, political, judiciary, and mediatic, we need an alternative that is possible. Thank you. 2 minutes for you, Margarita. In my first intervention, this pact is the necropothics in Europe. We opposed this from the European left from the beginning. We tried to amend it before the document was published. The architecture of the European scenario has produced this, and there's a vulneration of human rights. I present 2 questions. Why are people coming? It doesn't matter how high the fences are, they're not going to stop coming. If we rob their resources, they cannot live there, and that's why they're coming. Who is earning money with all this business of externalizing borders? For us, Frontex has 20 years of research of all types of violations of human rights and of corruption. There's many people who are making money by means of this externalization of borders. We are looking for safe migration paths and a series of tools that allow us to guarantee the right to migration. And also we must put the focus on structural causes. There will be, of course, climate refugees and war refugees that require asylum, but we should also realize that we are responsible and we have developed our economies by the exploitation of these countries. Where do we get the metals from? They're not coming from the north. If we do not integrate this issue in the picture, why do the cops fail? Because what we do in the north is, if we stop using cars, then we send them, we make them pollute in the south as if we could protect ourselves in a bunker, but then the data comes and we don't save ourselves. This issue is not present yet, but the time will put everything on the table, and let's see if we can focus this from a human rights point of view. Otherwise, we will be devastated. I insist this was a trap, because there were 3 issues that should have been discussed in 3 different panels. I'm going to give the floor to the audience for some short questions, because we haven't got much time left. Very precise questions, or questions to a single or 2 speakers specifically. The system of having all questions at the same time, I wasn't so sure about that. Okay, we have my colleague here with the microphone. The interpreters cannot hear the question because she's not using the microphone. Okay, she wants to know what actions have been taken from the different political parties. Spain was the president of the European Council last year. There was very little advocacy for migrants. This pact is perverse and it's against people who request international protection. What has happened with the 700,000 signatures that had been collected? In the case of Colombia, Sorry, the interpreters cannot interpret because she's not using the microphone.
Estamos fuera de Colombia, pero seguimos realizando algunas mesas de trabajo en pro justamente de poder denunciar esa vulneración de derechos humanos que existe por la migración que viene, especialmente la migración forzada en este caso.
Vale, entonces,
So, Berta, those are two questions. First, which are the actions of each political party, specific questions, actions with regards to this pact. The second question is for Maite, what has been done about regularization? What has happened with this collection of signatures? Okay, two more questions, otherwise there'll be too many questions. Okay, Edith is there. Can I speak? Next question is me. I don't have a question. I am Ukrainian, and we all know the situation of Ukraine. I don't want to speak about violence or rights. I want to thank Spain because many refugees have come to Spain. Thousands of people. No people were left in the street. Nobody is dying of starvation. And that is good itself. Because you know that an economic problem on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have a problem with when the country has a war. We have been having a war for many years, almost 10 years, with attacks from Russia. But we have a full-on war that has lasted for 3 years already. We want to thank all the countries because Spain, not only Spain, we've requested for support from everywhere. All the countries, when we come to Spain, whenever we have a demonstration, they come to our demonstrations, they help us, and they are always at our sides and supporting us. Many people came here with qualifications, doctors, teachers, engineers, and they are working here and they're working with other jobs, they're working in building sites, cleaning, and so on, because they don't have language knowledge. But Spain allows us to hide our refugees here. We can hide from the bombs. We thank all the countries, and Spain in particular, for your warmth, your support, and your help. Okay, I want to say hello very briefly. I am a part of the network, and I want to thank all the speakers who have been here giving their opinions. I wanted to talk about the pact and the Frontex, but that has already been spoken about. I think all organizations of migrants are suffering from the lack of appointments in the Foreign People's Office, and people are desperate because they cannot access stability. How can we move forward this struggle to know which doors we should knock? How do we do this so that strengthening and having more appointments in the Foreign Office is a reality? My name is Luz. Thank you to the speakers for all they have provided. This is a consideration, mostly for Margarita. These spaces are quite positive, and they give us a different perspective for the people who want to participate more actively in the political arena. Why each one of us has not taken this opportunity to bring one or two more people? Because you're all leaders, you represent different associations, you are already empowered. But where are the people Why have we not invited other people? Because there's a space here that has not been taken advantage of. Regarding the speakers, some things that I have heard repeatedly are that we should, we must, but nobody said we are going to do this. We're still talking about expectations, but there's some uncertainty. We have not heard this is going to be done. I think there's a lot of work to do, a lot of work left to do. Marilyn and Margarita, I would like to ask you, and also you from this side, we should call our attention, you should tell us off, we should, the population are demanding, requesting things, but also as citizens, as Valencian citizens, and also many Spanish citizens, people who are a part of citizenship, we are not collaborating, we're not doing our part, we're not working for change. This is my brief consideration. Thank you. We have one more. We'll get the three last questions. Edith, I know you're there for the issues of regularization. Three more questions and that's all. 1, 2, 3. Very brief question and a brief answer I would like. What strategies are you carrying out from the parties to motivate migrant population to vote? My question is out of context, but I was thinking of the women suffering in Gaza. We support the Palestinian cause. Where is the Palestinian Union with regards to the women and children who are suffering in Gaza? More than 30,000 deaths in Gaza are women and children. They always say they say Israel has the right to exist and defend themselves. And the question is, does Palestine not have the right to defend themselves and create a state with all the rights and protect their women and educate their children and have peace among themselves? More than a question, the interpretation I make is that we should take this into account in this space. We should take into account what is happening in Palestine. We are all aware of this. We have not mentioned this and we should have done it. So thank you very much for your contribution. I wanted to start with a consideration. 200 years ago, Karl Marx wrote that getting sewers that used 2 needles was harder than finding 2-headed people. 200 years later, we're seeing the structural labor crisis in work crisis, employment crisis in Europe. We see how factories are closing. Volkswagen closes 3 factories in plants in Europe. Nissan is also closing its plant. Audi in Belgium is also closing its plant. So the specific question is, what is the role of migration when European population has a structural model that is rejecting the population, and now we find ourselves in the time of the end of employment? What strategy do we have for the integration of society where the migrants have their place? It's a very complex topic. We could relate this with international cooperation. We have made questions about regularization and specific strategies. The Migration Pact is a tragedy that we tried to solve internally. We tried to improve the text before they were approved.
Podía digerir, lo rechazamos.
When we saw that the text was unacceptable, we rejected it and we voted against. We have the tools that we have. We don't have the strength for some things. And also we tried to propose an alternative view. It's not true that there is not another model of migration possible. My solidarity with the Ukrainian colleague, but migration policies in Europe are racist, because if people who flee from wars are white and blue-eyed, there's no problem to show them solidarity. But if they flee from other places, then we do activate all our defense mechanisms. That on the one hand. As for the regularization, we provided all our support, governmental, parliamentarian level, so that this moves forward. There are more parts implied here, but it's a clear position on our side. At the government level, in my ministry, we are working a lot on migrant children. We're focusing on migrant children, as you know, is one of the main attack lines of the far right. So our red line is to protect their rights so that they are not violated. It's not enough, but there have been many contributions in order to improve the immigration law. Of course, we will keep on fighting to ensure regularization, but there are a lot of contradictions. Our positions are quite radical, and we are making steps in the meanwhile. And with this, I will finish. I think that we can fight anti-politics. There's a lot to improve in many organizations, but organizations are necessary to change things. Social organizations, but also political parties. And only from within we'll be able to improve things. So I encourage you to mobilize, to do everything you can in your countries, but spaces are yours. Well, I do agree. In our pact, we mentioned things that have been presented. Podemos did that in the Congress with our capacity, also in the left, in the European Parliament, and we are doing that. And also, the voice in favor of the Palestinian people is in the parliament, but what we lack. Why do you say we need to, instead of let's? We do not have the power to do that. We are there. We do not have enough power, unfortunately, to grow so that these voices are heard high enough. Even among us, when I see, we're just a few. In Podemos, we have 4 female MPs in the Congress. In the left, in the European Parliament, it's a small group with not much capacity, but we are there. We are saying things, and even among ourselves, our voice is so small that it's difficult. So let's act as loudspeakers for ourselves. That will be a way to put pressure. As for the end of employment, let's read Silvia Federici and feminist authors who have given Marxism a turn, and what we are defending in this case from the intersectionality is that the future will be about care work, and the work that women have done historically should be remunerated and recognized. Maite, just quickly, regarding the question, last week in the ministry, a new immigration regulation was approved to improve the inclusion of migrants. It is based mainly on 3 questions: employment, training, and family. This amendment will enter into force in 6 months. If you want additional information, I can give it to you. Just one comment from the experience that we had here in Valencia. I understand the comments regarding the welcoming of Ukrainian refugees, but I must say that Valencia was a refuge city. We welcomed the Aquarius, the ship full of refugees, thousands of people came here from Ukraine, and again now there's a family that has been left, for Colombian family from Huesca. That is different between the PP and Vox government and the government that we used to be part of. Lucia, just quickly, when we say we have to, we need to, in the end, the force that political parties have, the political parties that we represent, it's small. Compromise, for instance, is more stable at a local level and a regional level, and in the state level and European level, we are just testimonial. But where we are clear about our base. The European Compact goes against the rights of any person. Wherever we've gone, we've voted against it, and we've been always in favor of regularizing the other possibilities. There are other ways of welcoming people and providing asylum. Also at a local level, and I'm going to say this because, well, it's a scandal. Even emergencies at the local level have been taxed. That is, how long does an emergency last, and how do you tax it? There's no way to tax it. But now for the Valencia City Council, it's 15 days the most. So after 15 days, people are evicted. And if you have no support, for instance, as usually happens with migrant people, it's a dramatic situation. There are different ways of approving policies at the state and local level. I don't know if we can have one more minute.
Por favor. Sí, sí, por favor.
About regularization. Just briefly, the amendment to the immigration regulations still considers us as a workforce. If we have no labor contract, we are not considered. Many people will be left aside. Caritas says that thousands of undocumented people are going to be left aside. They have no passport, they have no contract, they have no way to show that they are living here. Something is happening here for everyone who has lost everything because of the flood. That's why the regularization is so important, because governments do amendments, but we can have a participative process of citizens that demands to be heard, because we are human rights and we are human beings and we have rights. So in a few days there will be an important day in Congress, so please pay close attention to the social media. We will launch a campaign and we will demand political parties to support us fully, as they should, so that migrants are considered as people with rights and not just an exchange coin. Thank you. Thank you. See you soon. Thank you, Lucia. Thank you, Margarita. Thank you, Marilyn and Maite. Thank you for this interesting roundtable. Thank you, Angela, for the moderation. You've done a great work, great job. Just 2 more seconds, please. First, remember that we're going to take a group picture. Remember that you have to sign the attendance list for those of you who haven't. In this roundtable, many things have been said, but please remember that the world conflicts that we have right now, there are 10 large, serious conflicts that are generating refugees. We are even talking about a possible world war. We need to be concerned. I would like to quote George Orwell. He published in 1984 the novel out of which the concept of Big Brother came. He was a member of a ministry. He used to manipulate historical facts, to manipulate the population. So let's not allow the manipulation of fake news.
Una de esas manipulaciones que hizo.
Due to the manipulation of newspapers in Spain, according to which gender violence was in the race due to migrant men, in our network we started acting under the leadership of Ayeti, and they were awarded with an award from the Ministry of Equality. So congratulations to our colleagues. Every line needs to revolve our stomach, and we need to fight against it with arguments. Let's take a picture here. Lunch will be in the garden. Please be careful with the plants.